Hello, welcome. My name is Dr. Funda Goldman. I'm a licensed naturopathic physician with a private practice in Stratford, Connecticut. And today I'd like to talk to you about the concept of Ayurvedic food combining to help aid better digestion. Before we jump in too far, a note of caution at a time. The information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. If any symptoms you have persist or worsen, please consult with a qualified healthcare professional for individual medical advice. So let's talk about the why and the what of food combining and why this is important. And again, this is a concept from Ayurveda, or traditional Indian medicine. But it's important to remember that the digestive tract is a delicate living tissue, and it can be harmed by combining improper foods. And it is taxed. It's really challenged by trying to process difficult food combinations. A lot of people don't really think about this too much. They just sort of eat what's around, and as long as it goes through, it's all good. But really, we're dealing with a delicate tissue here. Food combining recognizes this idea that some foods are just too much, too challenging for the digestive system, and what will happen is that it shows us how to avoid certain food combinations to avoid digestive upset. And when I'm talking about digestive upset, typical symptoms include gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, pain, cramps, that sort of thing. And eventually, with enough improper food combining, this can lead to the buildup of what's called ama, or toxicity, from an Ayurvedic perspective. And this ama, this toxicity, can back up into other systems and cause things like arthritis, for example, with long-term, again, improper food combining. So let's get into the different categories. The first big one is fruit. Fruit in general, Ayurveda for the most part advises to eat by itself. Part of the reason why is because it's acidic and it's also sweet. And so when you give something acidic to other foods, you can start a fermentation reaction, which I'll get into a little bit more in the next slide. So generally fruit you want to eat sort of by itself. Some people can handle eating fruit with some like nuts or seeds, but other things that are typically found with fruit combinations really don't work very well in the stomach for a lot of people. And lemon in particular is one of those fruits. Lemon specifically is not advisable to eat with foods such as cucumbers, tomatoes, milk, and yogurt. And you'll see as we go through, I've listed the foods to avoid eating with the other foods. And you'll see here that tomatoes, milk, and yogurt will come up again later on as we talk about vegetables and as we talk about dairy products. Melons are also another one that's particularly difficult to combine with other foods, and this one in particular should mostly be eaten by itself. So fruits are something important to, again, mostly eat by itself. And when I say eat by itself, I mean eat an hour away from other food. So give it a little space. An hour to 2 hours is great. So why is fruit problematic? Well, I usually ask patients when I start talking about this concept is like, do you know how to make cheese? Most people don't. Most people don't make their own cheese anymore. But a simple way to make cheese at home is that you boil up some milk and then you add an acid like lemon or vinegar. When you add that acid to boiled milk, what happens is that you get the separation between the solids and the liquid, or the curds in a way. And so because fruit is acidic, basically when you add fruit, that's sort of like a substitute for lemon or vinegar or something that's even more acidic, but it works just the same. And then you end up generating this basically a similar fermentation reaction. So a lot of times in my office, I'll see people showing up in the office and they're eating like berries with yogurt for breakfast, for example. And that can cause a lot of digestive problems because the two side reactions from any fermentation reaction are one acid. Any sort of acid will increase the possibility of inflammation and irritation in the body, but specifically here the gut, and this can lead to things like diarrhea. The other thing that happens, another side reaction of any fermentation, is gas. That's why you see like bubbling, that sort of thing happens when something's fermenting. And the gas will create gas in your stomach, so it'll create bloating and pain typically. So when you combine something like blueberries with yogurt, this kind of reaction tends to happen. And even on their own, again, blueberries, they're a healthy food, but on their own they're acidic. And yogurt is also acidic because it's already fermented. So when I have people show up, eating fruit with yogurt, even though, theoretically it's very healthy, when you combine it together and you eat it every morning for breakfast, I have a lot of people showing up who end up with reflux, for example. So my advice to them is to eat the yogurt and eat the blueberries, but just not together. So have your yogurt maybe with yogurt you can combine with things like nuts or seeds. I actually typically do that. But then the fruit, you want to wait for an hour or two before you eat the fruit. So you can still eat them, just not together. So another important food category here is basically proteins and grains. Beans are sort of notoriously, just on their own, sort of notorious for being difficult to digest. But especially when you pair beans with things like fruit, which we just mentioned, milk, cheese, yogurt, so dairy products, eggs, fish, meat, so protein, when you start combining your proteins together, it makes it very difficult for the digestion to work efficiently, and then you'll end up with problems, GI upset. Eggs are sort of similar. Again, not great to combine these with fruit. Also not great to combine with beans. Khichdi. Khichdi is a Ayurvedic or Indian dish where it's a combination of lentils and usually basmati rice. So again, the lentils in there is not a good idea to combine with eggs. Milk, cheese, yogurt. So again, dairy products. So you're starting to see themes here, and fish and meat. So when you eat eggs, you might want to eat them mostly with things like, sauteed vegetables, rice, that sort of thing. Grains are also problematic, especially when you combine them with fruit or tapioca, which is made from the yucca plant. So again, you see fruit and you see fruit. Fruit's not good with beans, eggs, grains. And we talked about fruit already, why that's problematic. But why are grains problematic? Similar to making cheese, actually the way that you make alcohol is that you ferment a grain. So when you take fruit, the acid from fruit, and combine it with grains, you're basically making some sort of alcohol in your stomach by fermenting it. And again, the side products of that reaction is acid and gas. So more problems for the tummy. Vegetables. There are a few vegetables to consider here. Tapioca from the yucca plant is difficult to digest, mostly because it's so dry. But again, best not to combine it with fruit, especially banana and mango. Raisins, dried fruit, beans, difficult to digest. Jaggery, which is a kind of sweetener, often used in India. The big one for probably Western eaters is the nightshade family or Solanaceae family. The vegetables contained in this, actually they're vegetables and fruits here. Tomatoes is considered fruit, technically. But the nightshade family, that includes tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, and eggplant. So very common to, especially the Mediterranean world. Combining nightshades with things like melon, cucumber, and dairy usually makes they're more problematic, more difficult to digest, and can cause GI upset. Radishes are also problematic, so if you eat radishes, don't combine them with bananas, fruit in general, raisins, fruit in general, milk, so dairy products. So you can kind of see that the same foods keep coming up, right? We see fruit, we see some grains, dairy, beans, proteins. So when you combine these all together, it usually creates a problem. And then finally here we're looking from the dairy perspective and a few miscellaneous items. So milk in general, on its own, it's a complex food. It's got some carbs, it's got some protein, it's got some fat. So generally don't want to combine milk with things like, fruit in general, but bananas, cherries, melons, and sour fruits particularly. Bread containing yeast, because again, when you have something like yeast, you can start a fermentation reaction, and if you try to ferment milk, you'll end up with cheese again in your belly. Fish, meat, again, combining the protein from milk with other proteins, generally not advisable. yogurt. So combining different kinds of dairy, because milk by itself is kind of difficult to digest, and yogurt is fermented. So when you get those together, the yogurt can start to ferment the milk and then cause problems. Kitchery again, because again, it contains lentils. Yogurt's also a problem with, again, fruit, nightshades, milk. You're seeing the pattern here. Cheese, fish, meat, eggs, and hot drinks. Yeah, so you can see sort of it works both ways, depending on what food you're focusing on. Honey is also not advisable to combine, especially with ghee, in a 1-to-1 ratio. And it's also important to note that honey should not be cooked. So if you want to put honey in warm tea, that's okay, but you don't want to use it like in baking per se. It can cause digestive problems and GI upset. And hot drinks, not best to combine with things like mango, cheese, yogurt, so dairy products, fish, meat, and starch. So there you go. There's the list. And also I wanted to add here a little bit outside of the food combining, but certainly within the realm of Ayurvedic nutritional advisory stuff, is to really favor warm, moist cooked food, especially in cold weather. I find a lot of people come to me with digestive issues and they're eating a lot of like salads and ice cream, really cold, dry foods, uncooked foods in the middle of winter. And that's going to be really hard on my digestion. Cooked food is much easier to digest than raw, cold, hard foods in general, because by cooking it, you're already kind of using the heat outside of your belly to break down the food and make it softer so that your digestion has less to do, so it's less taxing, less challenging for your own GI. So it kind of takes the burden off your GI so things function more smoothly. The other thing is that when you eat a lot of cold, dry, hard food, that will make your body and your colon cold, hard, and dry. So if you tend towards vata or wind-like symptoms, and I actually have a video on this if you'd like to get deeper into it, but if you suffer from things like arthritis and cramps and dizziness, fatigue, anxiety, insomnia, constipation, these things are considered vata or wind type conditions in the Ayurvedic paradigm. So when you eat cold, hard, dry foods, they're like cold, hard, dry wind, and then the wind within your body and mind increases. And this also generates constipation typically. The other thing, from more of a kind of Western physiological point of view, is that cold food and drinks, especially in the United States, I find a lot of people drink cold water or iced water all day long, even in cold temperatures, cold weather conditions. The cold food and drinks, they constrict, once they hit your stomach, they'll constrict the capillaries there, and this will decrease blood flow and the ability to absorb nutrition properly. So if you've ever experienced, maybe you were outside in the garden on a hot day or went exercising or something, and you come and you're thinking, oh, a big glass of cold water would be great. It sounds great. But then you drink that cold water and then your belly just sort of like blows up. And all you did was drink water, but it was cold water. So again, what happens is it constricts the capillaries and then there's not good absorption coming from your GI. So a little side note here to add into the mix, because this also is typically a problem. So let's take this information, these concepts, and apply them to specific, conditions so that we can kind of get a handle on how to use it in the real world. So let's talk about adjusting meals first. So just as one example, I had a patient who went out with some friends to a Mexican restaurant, and she ordered chicken enchiladas, which includes corn tortilla, cheese, tomato sauce, and the chicken, with rice, beans, sour cream, guacamole, chips, salsa, and alcohol. So that was the whole meal. Maybe there was dessert too, but just this is enough. So, and then she was telling me she was doubled over in pain. It was just so much gas, bloating. It was like really painful. So I told her about food combining. I gave her a sheet. And if we look here, I noted in red all the things that I mentioned were difficult in food combining. So meat, chicken, cheese, dairy, tomato, nightshade family, beans on them by themselves, sour cream, dairy that's fermented, so it's pretty close to yogurt, and salsa, because again, there's tomatoes and peppers in there, so more nightshades. And there are other difficult things in here as well, but just from the food combining perspective, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things combined on one plate. So it's a perfect storm to create GI upset. And besides the spice, but that's another issue. So what I suggest is the next time she goes eating at a Mexican restaurant, because I'm sure she likes Mexican food, she likes to socialize with her friends, they're probably going to go back, is the next time around, she might skip the beans, the sour cream, and the salsa. The chicken enchiladas, that's kind of hard to break up. But if she had chicken enchiladas with rice, guacamole, and chips, and something to drink, that just changing it that much may be enough to get her through dinner without doubling her in pain. She may need to do more, but this seems like a fairly easy way for her to manage her meal at a restaurant such as this. As some other advice, if she was somebody, she wasn't, but if she was somebody who typically suffered from like reflux and diarrhea, which in the Ayurvedic system means that she has too much pitta or fire, she wants to avoid the fiery stuff. So that would also include like alcohol and salsa and the spicy stuff. And then if she was more of a wind vata type person with more gas and constipation, she wants to avoid the cold, hard, dry foods, meaning corn, the beans, and the chips. So she wants to stick with soft, moist, warm, cooked foods like the enchiladas, the rice. She could do a little bit of sour cream guacamole. Yeah, there you go. So this example gives us good information and kind of a good exercise in showing you how to use the food combining to adjust your meals so they're less problematic for you. And then if you have additional issues such as too much pitta or fire or too much wind or vata, some other adjustments you can make. So everybody's a little bit different with what they need, but as a first pass, this is how you would go about it. And then you can also not just adjust your whole plate, your whole meal, but you can adjust recipes because some recipes are problematic. So I had another patient who came in and she was working with all these suggestions and she's doing much better. She was saying she had cramps 2 to 3 times a day when she first came in and had gone and gotten colonoscopy, endoscopy, and all that kind of stuff, but she was still having problems. So I was teaching her how to eat this way, make it a little easier for her GI. And then she came back and she said she made eggplant parmesan, and that really kind of blew her up, and she had gas, pain, cramps again. So if we look at a traditional recipe of eggplant parmesan, what you do is you coat eggplant slices in egg and breadcrumbs, and you fry them, and then you add some tomato sauce, cheese, and spices. So again, using the food combining information, what in here could be problematic? Well, she's got eggplant, so that's in the nightshade family. Egg, we talked about that. That can be problematic. Tomato, another nightshade, and cheese, so dairy. So just from the food combining perspective, that's a problem. And then there are other problems potentially as well, but just from the food combining perspective. So what she could do with this recipe, she could take eggplant slices, put them in a pan, sprinkle a little bit of sunflower oil over them, then some breadcrumbs, and add just a few slices of fresh tomato, a small sprinkle of cheese, and then bake it all together. And it wouldn't be traditional eggplant parmesan. I'm sure my Italian patients would be the first ones to tell me that. But it would be something akin, relatively close to eggplant parmesan that you could still enjoy that won't, create a problem for you, in terms of your digestion. So also within this recipe, you could potentially by eliminating the egg, decreasing the tomato and the cheese, that's going to make it easier to digest. So especially if you get gas and cramps, that's kind of the first line here. But if additionally you had a lot of like inflammation, reflux, diarrhea, irritation in the gut, you want to avoid frying because that hot oil really just, it's like putting kerosene on a fire. Doesn't help. Hot spices, even like the oregano, that sort of thing. That's pretty spicy. You might be better off with basil. It's not quite as hot as oregano and still get that kind of Italian flavor. Tomato sauce is just, concentrated acid. That's pretty tough. So that's why if you put a few slices of fresh tomato, that's going to be a lot less concentrated, a lot less acid in there than just pouring a bunch of tomato sauce in there. So even making that change would potentially be helpful for somebody who suffers from inflammation and diarrhea. And again, from an Ayurvedic perspective, those kind of symptoms are noted to be high pitta or high fiber conditions. And again, I have videos on vata, pitta, and other videos on Ayurveda if that's of interest. There you go. Hopefully that was a good introduction to food combining, why it's important, and how you can actually use it in day-to-day life, in terms of what you are doing. So you can make some relatively minor tweaks and really help improve your digestion and start decreasing all these really disruptive symptoms in your life. So thank you for your time. I wish you well, and until next time.